Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Leading from the Front. And before I bring our guests up and we get into the show, I gotta talk about our sponsors. And two of them came together last night to do something absolutely incredible. So Nick and Guy Galindo, you know her as the gifted bipolar writer. She's also guiding brilliant writers publishing. Her and Jen Lynn, who is Uniqua New Beauty Norm LLC, they are partners of ours. They're sponsors for our show. And they got together because it was Hudson Valley Gives Day, one day of giving. It was our very first one to do as HR for You. And they got together and their goal, they had a goal of each of them to raise $200. They decided, no, we're going to bump it up. We're going to raise $500. They ended up raising $1,000. And all of that goes to Transformation Kitchen and our efforts. If you don't know, if you haven't been following, I'm about to take a trip of a lifetime. I'm going to Matagalpa, Nicaragua with Rayo de Sol, Peter Shaler and his crew there. And we're going to build our first international transformation kitchen. That works with a population there of 41,000 people to teach not only culinary skills, life skills, power skills, and empower people that are in a greatly impoverished and poverty-stricken area the ability to learn skills so they can create their own jobs. So we are so excited. I am so stoked for this trip, and it's just around the corner. So before any other further ado, thank you, Guiding Brilliant Writers Publishing. Nick, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen Lynn. It's incredible the work that the two of you have done. I also have to give a shout out to the Sustain Network. Tucker Bascom, he approached me and said, hey, I have these micro courses. I'll text you them, then you can give them to Tez and let him try them out. They are fantastic. Imagine people that have never been taught leadership skills, but getting them in such a way that they can digest them quickly and use them when and if they need. So learning stuff about EQ, learning about, conflict resolution without, you don't have to use these. You can use this in your mind and your heart and talk through things. It's incredible. So Tucker, thank you so much. Thank you for being a partner and a sponsor. And last but certainly not least, I've got a video to show you for ourmerchpage.com. You know that QBC has been our partner and is still our partner for all of our mugs and our pins and all our coolie stuff that we have, stuff that you see behind me here, our puzzle pieces and all of that. She is so talented. QBC, that's Shaquita Brew. And I love the Brew crew out of Atlanta. Thank you so much for all you do for us. But our merch page is going to be our newest sponsors that are going to take care of all of our t-shirts. So we've got some really cool t-shirts coming up, not only for our events in the future, but for just every day that we can sell to people And it just is spreading the word of what we do. Also gives us another trickling into Transformation Kitchen. And I'm really stoked to have them on board. I'm going to show you this video real quick, and then we're going to bring everybody up. So hold on. Hopefully this works, because Restream's been having some issues lately, and I have been on them about this. But check this out. Whether you're a nonprofit, church, school, or business, let ourmerchpage.com become an extension of your marketing team. They'll handle the design, sourcing, fulfillment, and management of your merchandise marketing needs, so you can stay focused on what. Yay! It looked like the whole thing went through. So, without any further ado, let's kick this party off. Yes, I absolutely love that. Joel Felsen Steve from across the water. He's coming back for a second trip in July. I get to hug his neck again. Him and Mac. I love it. Thank you so much for that intro, outro. It's one of my favorite videos that we have. And these ladies that you may recognize, we have this every quarter. We have a conversation called Leading from the Front. And these ladies are in the thick of it. Tiffany Castagno, right below me on the screen, celebrating 5 years as the CEO and founder of CEPHR, cultivating the evolution of professional HR. I had my shirt on the other day. I was out barbecuing, talking to people. I had my shirt. I was like, look, I got to be in the virtual squad that was there cheering her on. And it was so cool that she had that had so that us that were not able to physically be there, I'm jealous, Phil, we were able to cheer in the background. So G and so many other people were there, and I just love that. I'm cheery. Over to my left, your right, is Dr. Marie Ristow. She is the founder of Systematic Equity Edits. She is an educator and instructor. She is incredible. I got to be a small, tiny piece of what she was creating, and it was illuminating for me, because I'm coming in thinking, wow, I got this. I know all about DEI. I know where my biases are and all that. Well, this kid got to learn. So it was good for me to see. And it's great when you can step back and take in that learning and continue to learn, even for us not so young people in the audience. And my buddy Kylie Van Luyn, the founder and CEO of Elevated Coaching and Consulting Global. She recently just joined forces again with Global Girls Glow as a strategic advisor on their board. And she is our vice president on our board for HR for You. So thank you, ladies, for being here in the audience. Thank you for being on the panel. I know it's going to be an incredible conversation, because we're talking about emotional intelligence in leadership, and what we need now more than ever is a lot of EQ, a lot of empathy, a lot of love that people are going to give their people and their teams and themselves. So I just want to kick it off by just kind of doing a round robin, and I won't call on anybody in particular. You guys just go however you feel led, but talk a little bit about what you're seeing in your work environment now, and what some of those struggles might be, so that we can kick this off. Go ahead, Tiffany. Anybody?
I think, go ahead, Ann. You look like you were chomping at the bit.
Yeah. Because I have notes, people. Like, I've been taking notes all week. So I'm going to set you up to just give some incredible examples here. So I have been living in a world where words mean a lot, right? And the absence of words. And so I typed in my little conversation with ChatGPT about what would happen if we removed words like inclusion, equity, diversity from EQ? What would that look like? And it gave me 5 focus areas. And I'll just give you the main areas because I'm sure that we're going to have a huge conversation around all of them. We could have a huge conversation around even just the first one, because what it does is it brings in a surface level of understanding, right? It dumbs down what people are experiencing or thinking about in regards to the human side of our entire being. Overlooking systematic biases, missing opportunities for belonging, emotional labor becomes unequal, and short-term compliance versus long-term culture change. So I have lots of notes within each of those categories, but I would love to hear a little bit of what you ladies have to say about what you've experienced in your workplace with any of those areas.
Sure, I'll go.
Yeah.
I think, wow, way to kick us off. All of that. And I think what's happening is, and what I'm seeing is putting people in a position to fight for their dollars. We talk a lot Chason, you do this a lot in your work, but all of us care about living wages. And so what it's forcing people to do is organizations trying to figure out what that looks like for them and what they can say, should say, what's not going to be good. How are they going to get their funding? Is it going to stay? Is it going to go? How will they support their people? Meanwhile, I'm seeing employees being really concerned about that in an external environment that's just chaotic, in a job market that's chaotic and challenging. And what I'm also seeing is sort of this breakdown in interpersonal dynamics between team members, between leadership and team, maybe even between leadership and board. And so it's almost like we have to come back to the center of humanity and remember to give grace and use our emotional intelligence. And that's just a high level of what I've seen that I've really been excited to have this conversation. I'd love to hear what Kylie's thinking too.
From my conversations, people seem to be in survival mode. They're not thriving, that's for sure. And we know that, survival mode's not a sustainable or an optimal state to be in long term. They're far from thriving. And I think right now what we're witnessing is this global shift in leadership norms. And what once defined professionalism and things like integrity is really being tested. And for people that operate with a high degree of emotional intelligence and a high degree of integrity in their workplace, and particularly leaders, they're finding this time really challenging because it's almost they're going complete, or they're having to consider or to remain safe in their jobs. They're going to they're being forced to decide between their values and making a living. We know that workplaces are evolving. We know that values are colliding. I hear that every day with the people that I talk to, and we know that expectations are rising. People are being expected to do a lot more for the same wage or the same salary. But in the midst of all of this, leaders are being asked to make difficult and often really uncomfortable decisions while holding space for other people's well-being. And so what we're seeing in our work is that a lot of leaders, emotionally intelligent or those lacking emotional intelligence, are really putting their own well-being and their own mental health on the back burner. And like I said, they're really in that survival mode. I think there's a lot of chaos right now. Obviously, I'm in Sydney. I'm not in the States at the moment. But whether you believe that chaos to be intentional or not, and that's not a discussion for today. But I think it's a really challenging time for leaders to take time that they're being, to pause and reflect and truly understand what their people need, with everything else that's, moving so fast around them and the goalposts constantly moving. So they're some of the things that we're observing at the moment. One thing I'm reminding leaders that I engage with is that, emotionally intelligent leaders provide the calm in the storm. So although they're so busy and they're juggling a bunch of different things and there is a lot of chaos in their environments at the moment, that they really do need to prioritise taking that time to pause and reflect and think about how to look after themselves. And truly, I'm not even calling it self-care, I'm calling it self-preservation at this point. But then, putting the oxygen mask on themselves before they can, think about how they look after their people.
That's so powerful because we talk about this a lot, and I see it all through LinkedIn and conversations about wellness. But it's something that I think even the most powerful leaders that have a boatload of EQ forget, because there's so much going on right now and there's so much changing on a daily basis that people are scared and they're upset and they're frustrated, and you have all of these emotions joining into your normal everyday work. And it's like, what? All right, I want to be aware. I also have to do work, but I want you to feel safe, and I want you to talk about, what you're feeling and what's going on. But we also have to be productive, and I need to also be productive, and I'm struggling. So, and especially in an educational environment, when you're seeing things on a daily basis just change, what's the best way for a leader to start doing some of that work and making sure that they're okay with themselves?
Well, I think recognizing that we are currently in a false sense of emotional intelligence, and while the people that we're relying on to do the work with us and for us and beside us are being alienated. And I think that's really important to differentiate as a leader, is that you can meet the compliance requests that come through to your company or your organization. And you have to some degree, depending on the size of your organization and your funding sources and whatnot. No judgment on anyone making any decision there or not. But while you're doing that, the people that you're expecting to do that work are the people that are being alienated through those policies and practices and procedures. And that's really important to differentiate, because you're going to start to see people missing out on work, people not showing up, people having more mental health issues because their entire livelihood and well-being is being challenged. And it's crackling through, if you will, generations. My granddaughter, I was talking with her on FaceTime, and she was sad because her table mate was moving. And I said, "Oh, what's going on?" "Well, he has to move back to his parents' home country because the parent was a researcher at a major university and the funding was pulled and they removed his citizenship, his ability to stay here in this country." And my granddaughter doesn't understand what's behind all of that, but she understands that she's going to miss that friend. And for me, she's going to miss that diverse perspective that friend brought to her classroom community. And so from our little itty bitties to our people who are retiring or getting ready to retire, it's impacting everyone of all generations and the quality of life and that human side of things.
I love these comments that we're getting. Welcome, Felipe. Hello, Nicole. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Sharon. Great to see you. We recently talked to Felipe on our Time to Change podcast. This guy, good grief. He is all over the place. He's got a fantastic couple of shows that he does. But I really love that perspective. EQ is a required skill. And I am guilty. I will put my hand up. I was one of the people that prior to the pandemic and a lot of soul searching, a lot of work that I did on myself during that time. I used to think that you couldn't learn that. You either had it, you didn't have it. It couldn't be learned. You were born with a boatload of caring for other human beings and EQ and empathy, etc., or you weren't. And that's from some of the bad experiences that I've had, not only from childhood, but growing up and what I've seen in my life. And so I was wrong. And it was good for me to see, just like I was wrong when I was going through Dr. Ristow's, program. And I'm thinking I'm going to ace this. And I'm looking for this great score. And I get this mediocre score. And I'm going, no, what? But it's about that learning, Felipe. And I love that you and Sumana and Ashley talk about it, but you talk about it a lot in your work as well. It's about that learning and that muscle that you have to continuously be striving to cultivate. Um, and it makes all the difference in the world for how we can show up ourselves and how we show up for our teams. I'd love for us to talk more about that and how we show up, because we've got a lot of comments. Nicole had one earlier as well where she was thanking Kylie for here. I really liked that you shared the other side, Kylie. And again, a lot of times we don't talk about those things. We only see one side. So I appreciate that very much. Let's talk about that and how leaders can show up, not only can recognize it themselves, but use that muscle and can do a better job of honing in now on that skill.
I think I'm just going to jump in here for a second, if that's okay. I think when it comes to EQ, we talk about EQ a lot, especially with leaders, because we know that EQ is a cornerstone of effective leadership. But like you were saying, Chason, people think you're born with it or you're not. And I think a lot of people think, oh, you're a born leader or you're not. But it can be a skill that's practiced and built and strengthened over time. But in order to do that, we need the first part of EQ, which is self-awareness. And we also need the willingness to improve our EQ. We need to care enough about and be honest enough with ourselves as leaders about our level of emotional intelligence to actually then seek out, like you were saying, Chason, that opportunity to learn and grow and evolve as a leader and, developing those gaps that we might have. So we can't develop as leaders in that space of emotional intelligence if we don't first recognize the importance of it as leaders, but also we're not honest with ourselves about our own level of emotional intelligence. And that is that big part about self-awareness. We need to reflect and look at our own gaps as leaders, and then be willing to do the work, right? It's like everything. To improve, to master a skill, we have to be willing to do the work. Is the work pretty? No. Is looking in the mirror every day and thinking, well, these are my shortfalls. That's not really that nice, or that's not that great to admit to. If we've got the courage as leaders to be really honest with ourselves, I think that's where it starts, with that self-awareness, and then we can, improve. But a lot of leaders that I talk to that are either executives and have been leaders for a long time, they talk about their aspiring leaders in a way when it comes to EQ, like it's something that somebody doesn't have, and they've kind of pushed them aside. And I think it's really important to remind leaders and anybody who's listening to this now that emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It's actually a core leadership capability. Like Felipe was saying, it's on all of his position descriptions or job descriptions. And I think that it's really important, particularly when we're talking about navigating those ethical grey zones. It's going to be really hard for leaders to do that effectively and successfully if they don't have those high levels of EQ.
Because what it can end up looking like is our organizational culture can seem like it's cooperative and seem like it's kind, but those underlying inequities are going to surface in ways that are going to completely impact not just the bottom line dollar wise, but the bottom line of your entire HR and how people are relating with each other and functioning. And so it really is important as a leader to tap into, not take things at surface level, right? When we remove things from our vernacular, Just saying the word culture, organizational culture isn't allowed to be in coursework anymore in any of our public universities across the nation. The word culture. And so when you remove the word culture from your organization and you go on as if nothing has happened, there's going to be ramifications that seep their way in. And depending on at what level of impact you're removing vocabulary across your organization or across your training materials or across your environment is going to directly impact how quickly you start to see the ramifications of it through the actions of your clientele, the kind of clientele that you're going to bring in and interact with, the way that your employees are going to interact with that clientele or with each other. It's a huge, it comes to our core. It touches our core. And when we don't know how to be who we are, or we're told that we can't interact in the way that we know that we are, it really puts you on edge. And it doesn't look like, in some places, very different from day to day, but it is playing out very differently. And so as a leader, you really need to be in tune with your people and with what's happening with every little change or nuance that's happening across your organization right now, because you can't take anything for granted. Your people deserve more, and your clients deserve more, and you deserve more.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked a lot about, or at the beginning, about values, and that keeps coming up. And there's an intersection there. And we're also, CEPHR has a value of being human at work. And we're social emotional beings and social emotional learners. And if we're taking out things like inclusion and culture, people, to your point, and how do you identify? We have self-identity, right? But within that, we need purpose and meaning at work. And we need to understand, do I belong here? Do I feel included? How do I connect to this organization, this team, this leader? And if we don't have the tools to be able to do that, there's also the piece of, when we look at EQ, of both the personal context and the social context. So we have to be able to understand and self-regulate, as we've said, all of these things. And sometimes leaders are put in a position where they haven't had the tools and training. They've grown up through the organization, as we've talked about before. They haven't received that. And so they're doing the best they can. And maybe they find themselves in a situation of frustration, and they're unable to really read the room. They're unable to connect and make those personal connections with their teams. And they're just like losing it and expressing that frustration on other folks, versus listening and leaning in with curiosity and helping people feel welcome and creating that psychologically safe environment that says, hey, it's okay if you're having a bad day. It's okay if you can't get to that project, or let's have a conversation on how I support you. Because our leaders are getting left behind too, and they aren't getting the support that they need. We know that burnout's we're in a mental health crisis. There's just so much happening that there's a lot of layers to unpack. And if you are a leader who, or even an individual contributor, you haven't had an opportunity to unpack that for yourself, or you don't have the benefits that go along with your employer to help you unpack that, such as an EAP, it can be challenging. And depending on your home environment, this external environment, there are a lot of things that are happening. And if we can't figure out things and we can't identify ourselves as having a culture, I would love to know what we're supposed to call it, because work culture is going to be there. It's going to be there whether we call it that or not. It's going to be there whether we are intentional about leaning on our values. And if we're really leaning on values, that are they aspirational? Are they values that we actually live by? What are the behaviors that come behind that? And are we seeing that? And all of that is wrapped up in EQ at the end of the day. And I don't think that that's often talked about. And there's an intersection, obviously, we're talking about it today, between diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and emotional intelligence. They go together. They're not separate things.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then for leaders, really creating spaces still for voices, right? That's going to be so essential, because when you are being asked to work within regulations that don't honor you or see you, or that challenge your inner core, it's going to be really important that as a leader, you're offering that space so that your voices can talk through. People can have the right to have those conversations with one another, amongst each other, so that they can still take a breath into like their integrity, right? The ethical squelching that is going on for many just to show up for work on a regular basis right now in different organizations is huge. And so as a leader, that's a big barrier. If your people are physically coming to work and not knowing how to continue on with the work and how they can't continue on with the work how they did the day before. And so how can you then as a leader step in beside them and acknowledge them as human beings and what they're bringing to the table, and honor humanity, instead of just saying, well, we've got a deliverable and I need you to just set that aside and move forward. Because it's going to impact the quality of work also for people.
Someone sent me in my, I'm part of in our Chamber of Commerce, I'm part of the nonprofit chamber committee. And I just got wrangled into being the secretary now. So now I have a position within all that. So it was already stretching to become part of that. But then now it's like, oh, now I'm like in it to win it. But it's funny, I got one of the nonprofit leaders for a larger organization gave me a document and said, this is all the things that grantors want you to remove from your language when you're sending them information on grants. And I was like, are you kidding me? And it's like, no, if you've got this language in your grants, they probably won't even say anything to you. You just won't get the grant. And I'm sitting here thinking, just as you're saying this, I'm thinking of how it is trickling to so many different fields and so many different people. Here I am, this goofy hockey guy that's sitting in his office typing up this grant for our little nonprofit that could, and I've got to worry about how I phrase it, because you may not like that one word because that doesn't structure well with what you have going on in your organization. I was like, wow, I had to take a step back after looking at that list. I had to go like, wow, I can't believe this is where we are. I feel like, and I think the thing is that I feel like we were, with everything leading up to the pandemic and all the world was on fire. Stuff had started happening at the end of 2018, 2019. It was all in the press, but there was a lot of angst and anger and frustration, and people are home. But we were starting to come together, and we were starting to learn, and we were starting to grow and move forward, and places were understanding that you can have hybrid and you can have work from home, and it's okay. It's not about where you do the work, but how you do the work. And I felt like we started learning more about how people work and what they need, and to give them the tools. And we had this conversation with Felipe on our podcast about how the middle level management is just being forgotten. And we need to really double down on making sure that they're getting the tools that they need, because a lot of them have been put into place because of massive growth or other things, and they've never been trained. They've never been given the tools necessary, and you're relying on them as an organization to carry the line and do this work when they don't have the tools. And I think I feel like in just the last 6-8 months, we are starting to take steps backwards. That's the most frightening thing to me, is that I see that I've got to keep going on, and that we've got to keep going on. We've got to have conversations like this. We've got to talk to the Felipes and other people in here, and the Coles and everybody else that are in the audience. But we also have got to do better. And so I'm interested to hear more about your thoughts, ladies, as to what we can do to, even in these times, what we can do to make it okay for ourselves and for others that we are working with.
I think resiliency is huge. You know, you said we don't have the tools. The research that I did, 80% of the thousands of people that I researched said, I know I have biases. I don't know what to do with them. Like, I know I haven't lived in your skin, Chason. I'll never be a man. It's not a part of me. And so, like, I have to make sure that I'm constantly checking, like, what are my biases towards that when I'm working with men versus women, who are, like, the similarities and differences. You need to be equipped to recognize it, and then be able to have the tools to say, okay, like, I will never be, but I can do. And so here's a fast forward to just within the last couple of weeks. I just published a research piece that I did with some colleagues on universal design for learning in higher education and the representation in the syllabi. And our first submission was denied because of the terminology in the article. And so instead of, like, being like, okay, maybe we need to wait, it's not a good time, this is just like, let's wait to see what happens in the nation. We were like, no, like, let's go to the outer rims of North America. And we went to a Canadian publisher and got the acceptance immediately. And so that will be out there, because what I fear most is that there will be this glazing over of what we know needs to be present in order for emotional intelligence to really not just survive, but thrive in the workplace. Like, we have to make sure that we are still embedding inclusion and equity and diversity throughout that, even though we're not allowed to speak the words or research with the words present. But, like, you also can't use the word female in your research, so that's going to just, like, erase an era of research that's going to include feminism. And it doesn't have to. We can be resilient, and we can make sure that we can branch out in other forms and make sure that all people are represented and have a voice. And that's what we need to ask our leaders to continue to do, is be creative in, if they think that they've got a good plan, then think again and add another layer. Go a little more, do a little more, and really build up your people so that they can continue to, like, be equitable in the way that they're approaching the work, so that we can keep that as a playing field instead of taking steps backwards.
Oops. I love that. And I think also there comes this, well, for one, sometimes there's a lot of small p politics, internal, notwithstanding the external capital P politics. I think that also there's, like, a scarcity mindset of, who's going to rise to the top. And we already know that there are disparities there. There's underrepresentation there. But to allow leaders the grace and the space to be able to make mistakes, so that they in turn can allow their team to do that, which is great for innovation and creativity, which is great for people's sense of connection to the organization and their own purpose and meaning at work. And there's also just, we move at such a fast pace that when is there time to listen? I mean, there's plenty of time, but it's such, I'm seeing a lost art, and there's not enough curiosity. There's a lot of blame, and sometimes it's the process, right? It's not the person, or there's a lack of systems, or a lack of training or awareness, and there's bias, and we have to remember that is existent too. But what I feel, and I see it on the personal level, I see it in workplaces, and of course those two worlds integrate, hopefully well, but not always, right? That's why we're having this conversation. But we're not having deep enough conversations. And to your point, Chason, we had this beautiful opportunity in front of us in the pandemic. And what did we do? We rushed back, started, back into hustle culture, get this stuff done, come on back to the office without the exploration or the curiosity or the, hey, what does Tiffany need? Is this going to work? And then it's, you hear, well, that's not, if I do this for Kylie, then I have to do it for Anne, or I have to do it for Chason. And then what's Tiffany going to think, right? Because we're focused on equality instead of what is equitable and just doing the right thing at the end of the day. That is culture. That is, I always describe it as, at our core in my business, we are HR and culture consultants. We have a value of DEIB, and I fold that into everything. So I don't see that as a standalone thing. When I'm working with my clients, that's what we do. If leaders are working with their team, you still can have and lean on those core principles, because you're not going to have a team. You're not going to have an engaged team. They're not going to stay if they don't see themselves in the values and how they are displayed in the organization. And then no one's for the better, right? Like, you're not going to win against your competitors because, that they're going to take the people who want that purpose and meaning. And it just has layers after layers, but we are not exploring and digging deep enough. And we're not listening, which is exhausting, quite frankly, but it is such a skill and it is such a differentiator.
I'm seeing conversations in the chat about AI, and that's like a whole nother session, guys. Like I could talk about that like all day, because if you just think about equity in AI, right? Like paid version versus free, and in the college setting, it's just, you can't ignore that AI is happening. And I do believe that it is going to impact the knowledge industry like no tomorrow. It's going to be the biggest major hit that we've had on the knowledge industry in centuries. But we have to make sure that we aren't getting caught up in the fury of it and losing our ability to what my grandmother always told me, like, seek to understand first, be an active listener, like take in all of the information. And if you're like, for me in higher ed, if my coursework is something that a computer can do, then I'm not doing my job and how I'm engaging my students with the content to be better educators or to do their role to the best of their capacity. So with AI, when we look at that with emotional intelligence and when we look at that with equity, I just really look at that as a voice of caution to not ignore it, to build it in, but build it in a very eyes wide open way, so that you're not causing any inequities just by the sheer use of it. Because if you have an assignment where you require them to use or invite AI into it, and they don't have the access that someone else has, or the knowledge yet of how to use that in a responsible way, like, you're really opening up to, like, talk about opportunity for biases and for inequities. It'll be huge. So I think AI is a whole nother conversation when it comes into the realm of EQ. I think that we need to know that knowledge is powerful, and we don't want to give that up. We want to use AI to complement what we're able to do and support how we're able to move as leaders, our staff forward in a very positive way, instead of it being in a replacement way or in a comparative way.
I got to speak not too long ago with Enrique Rubio. If you don't know him, connect with him. He is the founder of Hacking HR and one of the global founders and team behind Transform, which is they've got branches all over the place. And one of the things he said that I will not forget is he said, in the history of technological revolution, it has never happened at one particular time. Like when it comes out, here's this new tech. It always stumbles and kind of fails a little bit. And then down the road, oh yeah, the computer. Yes, everybody should have that. It wasn't that way when it first came out. Same thing with cell phones. Same thing with, all of these things had their stumbling blocks, and they had to be tweaked before it was just part of what we do on a daily basis. And quite frankly, there's half the time that I'd like to take this thing and throw it like as far as I can. But it is it's become like this necessary evil. But I love that from the standpoint of exactly what you're saying is, we've got to, I don't want to get off of this whole AI topic, but I will say that, hey, there's a lot to be said about, as we're doing this EQ work and as we're building up our teams and as we're talking about psychological safety and creating places where people are heard and seen and feel safe to learn and grow and fail in place, that AI and all of the things that are coming around, that we're talking about it and that we're opening up that dialogue, and that we're not like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. The more we shy away from having conversations that are present, the more we make our people feel untrusting and feel like we are just out of touch. So as we are climbing closer to the hour, I want to do a round robin, and we'll start with Dr. Ann Ristow. We'll go to Kylie and then Tiffany to close it out. But 2 points. What do you hope to see in the future based on what we've been talking about? And any last final points about how you feel we can move the needle forward? So what you hope to see and moving the needle forward. And we'll start with you, Doctor.
Okay. I hope to see that this becomes the perfect example of how actions speak louder than words. I think we have an opportunity for our actions to speak louder than words. I think it's an opportunity for people to stand up. And so I don't even remember what the second part of was that you asked me about, but I think action speaking louder than words. And then I think also, like, for leaders to just, there's so much put on just our human capacity right now in this generation, in this era, and to really give people the space to grow and learn and recognize that even though you may not be able to use the terminology, or even though there might be different policies in place, you still set the context for the people that are working with you. And it's important that you're having them step up in their integrity every day, and that you're applauding that when they do.
I love
think
that.
that's really important.
And you answered both of them, even if you forgot the second one, you still
Okay.
answered it. So you did a great job. So
Thanks.
Kylie, what do you hope to see in the future, and any points on how we can get there and do better?
Yeah, it's tricky. I know I've got to be short. I love to yak. What I hope to see, even in this current environment, and we don't know what tomorrow looks like, right? I hope to see more organizations and more leaders and more just everybody, staff members included at all levels, understand that the most resilient organizations of the future, including tomorrow and what we don't know is coming, aren't those that with the strongest bottom lines. They're going to be those that have leaders and teams that are capable of balancing that strategy with humanity. It's really simple. I see people who are so desperate and in such despair, and literally their knees are hitting the ground in despair at the moment. And so for me, I really hope to see that more leaders recognize that even in the current environment, that culture isn't what's written on a wall or a set of values on a website. I really hope to see that everybody wakes up and realizes that it's what people experience and how they feel every day. And I constantly am talking about, I want you to understand deeply how your people are feeling. Because from that you can focus on what they need, and from that you can cultivate the culture and those environments where vulnerability is met with empathy, not judgment. So that's what I hope to see.
You did that in a very short period of time. Like I think that was like 3 minutes. So that was incredible. Tiffany, what do you hope to see in the future, and how can we get there? What do we need to do?
It will always come back to humanity for me, and that is our key and our way forward. So I hope to see us grounding more and supporting each other more in our very humanity. And even within that, the tips that I would give, what people can do is, there's a lot of transparency that gets left out sometimes, and we're not able as leaders to tell everyone everything, but we can help people understand why, and why we can or why we can't, and what that looks like. We can have that empathy and that self-awareness. And alongside what I hope and what I think is a tip is that we have the right conversations, and that we're able to have that at a deeper level, to explore and to lean on our values, because those will always be a guide. They always will. And even if things are going on in the regulatory environment, of course, there's going to be a compliance piece, but there are certain things that people, when we talk about integrity and our values, that they just cannot take away from us. Bottom line, it is who we are. And if we lean on that and each other, we can support each other, explore and get curious, listen, ask the right questions, as we've been sharing. And for me, I think that is the key to unlock what comes next for us. Similarly, that will be the downfall further if we don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all of you. And absolutely, you guys know how much I love you. I look forward to this every single quarter. It is just, it's such an incredible conversation. And every time we have it, I'm just like blown away. So hats off to all of you. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Dr. Marie Ristow, Kylie Van Luyn, Tiffany Castagno. We miss you, our friend Desiree. We're sorry that you couldn't be here, and we hope everything gets okay in your neck of the woods. But we love you as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors. And we will catch you next quarter. Look for that conversation, leading from the front. And you have been with HR for You Incorporated. I'm Chason Forehand. Thank you so much for being here tonight.